Alrighty, June Gem 16. This one is about state machines. And for those who have been reading my blogs and know me for all the years I've been at Nintex, I love state machines and I do a lot of stuff with them. So I want to get you guys to understand what a state machine is, why you would use it, for the type of business process that you're building out. Is it for workflow design? What's the reason for it? So first of all, point out a couple of things. We have the state machine action right here that you simply drag and drop onto the designer. And by simply, I mean that. There you go, it's there. Okay, now, basically what a state machine is it lets you define a number of different states that your workflow can be in. And then it just jumps between those states. So let's say you double click on that state machine, notice there is the choose a state that the state machine will start in. So there's some sort of initial state. And then you define what the different states are. So maybe this would be find the manager. The next one could be get manager approval. And let's add another one that says notify the initiator. Okay, and find the manager happens to be our first one. That's it. Bang. Okay. Now, the workflow, once it starts, would actually come down here. Go to the first state, right? Now, it's not the first state being the leftmost state. It is the initial or the first state that you define in here. So it could be any one of these. All right. Now, so let's say it goes to find the manager, and that could be, I'll just do something like this. You don't need to know the exact details of these actions, but you do a query LDAP action that's talking to AD to find the manager. Now, you need to tell the workflow where to go to next. So we have an action called change state. If I drag that onto here and open it up, you'll notice I have all my states. Find the manager, get manager approval, notify the initiator. I have an end state machine. So this is what tells the workflow to jump out of the state machine. And I have other value, which I'll talk about in a moment. So once we find the manager, we want to go and get manager approval. Right? Makes sense? The next one, let's do assign a task to that manager. And then we have two options. So where do we go to once it's approved? Where do we go to once it's rejected? Let's add another change state action. Let's just do the approved one for now. Okay, approved could be, it's been approved, therefore notify the initiator, right? So now we have a workflow that comes in here, finds the manager, goes to the next state, which is the get manager approval, assigns a task to the manager, and if it's approved, we go and notify the initiator. So we'll do something very simple. We'll just do send notification. So that'll let the initiator know that whatever they wanted or requested, it was approved. And then finally, we'll have another change state action that will end the state machine, right? So ideal scenario is come down here, find the manager, go to the next one to assign a task to the manager, get approval, jump to the next one, let the initiator know it's been approved, and end the state machine. Now, it only ends the state machine, so if you have other actions after this state machine, like that one there, or whatever other actions, the workflow will continue on down here. Okay, now, what do we do if the manager rejects this particular task? Now, we could definitely do this end state machine. The problem with that is that if we found the manager and we assign a task to them and we reject it, or they reject it, and we end the state machine, like I said, the rest of the workflow will continue on. So is that the best thing we want to do? Probably not. Maybe we need another branch that lets the initiator know, or let's actually do this. We'll go into the state machine and we'll say approval rejected. We'll just have another branch here, and you'll notice there it is over there. So now I'm going to go and say jump to approval rejected. Okay, so what do we do over here, right? If the manager has rejected it, what do we need to do? We don't really want the rest of the workflow to continue. Now you could have done something like, end workflow, and that should end the workflow. I'm not a big fan of using that particular action because it's almost like having some script or some workflow that you run, or let's say a workflow that you run, no, a process that you run or program, and then you decide, you know what, I don't really want to do, I don't want it to finish what it's doing. I'm happy with what it's done, and you go into Task Manager and you terminate that process. Not really a big fan of that, so I don't really like that particular action. So instead, what we might do is something like this. We will send a request to the initiator. So let's just go tell initiator to edit the request, right? So this will assign task them. They will then go and edit it, and then we'll have another change state action. And this time we're going to go back to manager approval. There we go. So notice this little bit of logic. Request comes in, find the manager, assign task to the manager, they reject it, we jump to the branch over here. The initiator goes and fixes whatever request they had, and then this comes back to the get manager approval and assigns another task to the manager. Now they get to approve or reject it again. So there's that little bit of looping that we now have in here and how easy it was to build that in. So that's one of the main reasons that you would build out a workflow using a state machine, is that it gives you this flexibility of doing this looping around, jumping from branch or from state to state until you get the desired outcome, and the workflow can continue on with the rest of the actions that it has. Okay, makes a lot of sense, hopefully. Okay, now, why do I particularly like state machines? That was one of the main reasons. That ability to do this type of looping logic without having to build a bunch of loops and set condition actions and run ifs and all that sort of stuff. So that's one main reason. The other one is notice how each state is labeled. So this is going to make it a lot easier for me to maintain my workflow over time because I'll know which branch I need to go to make the appropriate changes. Okay, now a couple of little gotchas. Notice where I actually put the change state actions. I've put them at the bottom of each state, right? Now the reason being is that when you use this change state action, it is not an instantaneous action, right? What this is actually doing is setting a flag behind the scenes in the workflow. So when the workflow gets to the logical bottom or end of this particular state, it knows where to jump to next. Now, what I mean by that is if I do something like send notification, and let's do another SQL action. Right? In this case, when the workflow starts, it'll come down here, it'll find the manager, it will set the flag, tell the workflow to jump to get manager approval, then it will run the send notification action, and then it will run the SQL action. When it gets to the bottom, it knows where to jump to next. Okay, so don't think that you can build, for example, something like, maybe have a run if here and some sort of condition. Oops, I can't spell. There we go. So if some condition is met, we're going to tell the workflow to end the state machine, right? This will get completely overwritten by the next change state action that runs, right? And it'll change that flag from end state machine to get manager approval. So definitely remember that this needs to be either the last action in the state, or at least you need to understand that when this action is run, it sets that flag, so it tells the workflow when to actually where to actually jump to next. Now, I actually do use this sometimes at the beginning of my states, right? Just so that I have a default state where this workflow is going to jump to. Okay, and it can be overwritten later, but at least I have some default state. Now, that's the first gotcha. The second gotcha is this. Let's actually get rid of this action. Notice that this state now has no change state action. So what will happen here is when the workflow comes in here, it will find the manager, send notification, execute SQL, and then you're probably wondering, then what? Then the workflow will actually come back around and do this again, and come back around and do this again, and come back around, do this again. Okay, so this is kind of like this hidden little bit of looping logic. So beware of that because it's very easy to build an infinite loop in here. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Now, although this actually does come in handy sometimes, because for example, you might do something like this. Oops, let's actually not do that one. Let's do a conditional. Set a condition here. Now we find the manager, and let's say if the manager's name starts with M, and then we have a change state action, and we go to get manager approval. If alternatively it does not find that the current manager that we got starts with M, maybe you do some sort of calculation or put some strings, some text together, or change an index or whatever it is. And what this means is that this workflow will come down here. Is the current manager start with M? No. Then do some calculation or build some text. Do the set. Well, let's get rid of these because that's just this is a whole process is kind of silly, but still, let's get rid of those. And so in this case, we don't find the manager that starts with M, so we come back around and we've made some calculations. So obviously the result of this is being used in this query LDAP action. So you could potentially go find the next manager. Nope, find the next manager. Nope, find the next manager. Oh, it starts with M. Great. Change it to get manager approval. Now we jump to that state. So you could use the fact that this actually loops back around if you don't have a change state action to your advantage and build some very, very unique workflow logic. Okay, hopefully this helps you guys out in building out bigger, better workflows, maintainable and robust workflows. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.